to Overtime Hockey Talk. My name is Mark Paul. My co-host Justin Baker joining me as we continue down the free agent marketplace. Justin, we talked on, Wednesday night, about 5 days ago, and since then, almost everybody's signed. We've got Johnny Gaudreau signed. Nazem Kadri still waiting, but other than Kadri, as far as the real big name UFAs that are going to just walk onto a team and be a huge difference maker, that's really the last one left. I suppose you could say Paul Stastny, John Klingberg, of course, and then maybe a Phil Kessel, depending on what he does, but not a ton left, but some interesting ones nonetheless, because some of these guys aren't going to get as much money as maybe they had hoped, but lots to talk about. Justin, since we last talked, what's the thing that surprised you the most? Is there any one thing?
Surprised me? I think really, I'll give you two things, right? So I'm surprised that the Montreal Canadiens were able to move Jeff Petry's contract without retaining a bunch of salary.
And getting a good player in return.
Absolutely. And I am surprised that I have literally heard nothing about about Nazem Kadri. Not an inkling of, he's talking to this team or he's having discussions with this team. It's literally no news. It's been dry AF. And so, that kind of that leaves me irritated because I need to know. I need to know things.
Yeah, it sounds like in terms of Kadri, this is my guess. My guess is that right now, I think Elliot Friedman said that Colorado was in on him still. So Colorado's trying to keep Kadri. And I think that they've probably told now after that, hey, Colorado's in on Kadri. After that, this is all my own assumption, not anyone else's. My assumption here is that they've told him, we want to keep you. We are going to give you a raise, and we're going to figure out how, but you need to give us time because we need to figure this out. Obviously McKinnon's a UFA, and I'm wondering if there's some kind of like, hey, we're going to move one guy, we're going to announce the McKinnon signing, and we're going to announce you kind of in the same breath kind of deal. They do have, they've got JT Compher's a UFA at the end of this year. You also have Eric Johnson, who's a UFA at the end of the year, and I know he has no trade clause. He can list 19 teams. That's not that restricting for the Avalanche. I wonder if Eric Johnson is going to be the guy that's got to get moved. And as soon as they can move Eric Johnson, then they sign Nazem Kadri for the same money there, which makes a lot of sense to me.
Oh, absolutely. So I actually thought the same thing about Philadelphia as well, too, right? That's what I've been pondering because, again, going back pre-free agency, when we were doing these predictions and I'm thinking about teams where I think Kadri would be a good fit, right? One of those teams that I thought might be a good place or landing spot for Nazem Kadri would be the Philadelphia Flyers, right? I think that
naturally
he fits John Tortorella's kind of style, a little gritty. He's got some skill there, but and it was the same thing with Johnny Gaudreau, right? They wanted to bring him in as well, and so they couldn't sign or bring in either of these big name free agents.
They didn't want to bring him in. He wanted to go there. That's what's came out is that he wanted to go there, and they said no. I think that they said, it's not worth trying to move three players to bring you in.
Sure, absolutely. Again, this is all pre-free agency, right? So, when it didn't come out that, again, Gaudreau had signed right away or, Kadri had signed right away somewhere, I thought, okay, well, Philly's trying to move a contract, right? Move a JVR's contract or,
I got to imagine if they could have moved all of JVR's contract that they would have already have signed, they would have signed Gaudreau. That would have been my guess.
Yeah, probably. So here's, again, all hearsay, but I imagine that, if a team's going to take JVR's contract, they probably want a first-round pick in return, and I know Philly's just not going to give that up right now. So
not in 2023, they're not.
Right, absolutely. That's the thing. They're going to be bottom feeders. And, Colorado, again, I could honestly see that as well, too, right? Eric Johnson would be the perfect candidate, especially with this team, or maybe even a Samuel Girard, right? I think he is a team that, 30 other teams are probably going to be like, hey, you know what? a young puck-moving defenseman signed at $5 million for the next 5 years.
That's why Colorado was going to keep him.
Right. Well, yeah, that might be why they keep him. But again, it's just a bevy of riches, right? They've got Josh Manson, they've got Devin Taves, Cale Makar, right? Bowen Byram's going to need a new contract next year. So they don't really need Samuel Girard because they've got 4 top-quality defensemen on top of him. So, again, if you had to choose between Girard and Bowen Byram, I would take Byram, given his recent success in the playoffs. But
I think, though, you're looking at it, and is Eric Johnson not it's the exact same situation as Ryan McDonough for the Lightning, minus the fact that, McDonough is still an effective, a very good defenseman who can play in almost anyone's top 4, whereas Eric Johnson he could play in your top 4, but you're more likely you're wanting him to be in your bottom 6 and be a guy who can slide up if needed. Helps that he's a right-handed defenseman, of course.
And that's the difference, right? Because McDonough can still play. He can still contribute in a top 2, top 4 role, where Eric Johnson, not so much.
I guess same situation, right? Like both guys have been with the team for a long time. They've been through the ups and the downs, and they're a part of the leadership group, and you're looking at the rest of what kind of needs to happen, and you go, if there's one guy who might need to be the casualty because of our success, it might be him. And the difference here also is Eric Johnson's a UFA at the end of the year, whereas McDonough obviously had 3 years remaining on his deal. That complicated a lot of things for re-signing Sergachev and Chernak and all the 3 big players they re-signed their to 8-year deals. So I would think, though, Colorado has to be looking to move Eric Johnson. If not, then Nazem Kadri signing there, I think, is a pipe dream. There's no one else you're going to move. You just re-signed Nichushkin. You re-signed Cogliano, Darren Helm. You re-signed Josh Manson. So at that point, you just say, well, there's no way you're going to bring in Nazem Kadri as well. So what other locations is Nazem Kadri going to? And that's, again, kind of goes back to the loop we just went around. I don't know where Kadri's going to ultimately end up, but I think he's waiting to see what certain teams might be able to do to open up the cap space necessary to sign him.
Yeah, and the problem is right, the teams that I'm sure he's still, again, he's got a cup, but I'm sure he still wants to compete for a cup, because once you get a taste, right, you want it. You want it again. So I'm sure he wants to go somewhere where he still has a chance to win, but ultimately, there's not a lot of money and there's only so much to go around. So, he might have to take a little less money. Do you,
if you're Kadri, and assuming that an offer may be able to be worked out, do you not look at the Detroit Red Wings as a really nice landing spot where, you're not, Nazem Kadri was never getting $8 million. That's just not going to happen. He's much older. Now, maybe if he went and he signed with a really bad team who's not on the up, just to kind of, I don't know. I don't think he's getting $8 million. I think that people are smart enough to go, well, 87 points. This is a crazy year for him. He's a 50 to 60 point guy. We're going to pay him around $6 million. That seems to be a reasonable cap hit for Kadri, who's definitely a complimentary player. He's not your first line center. You're not going to pay him that way. The Red Wing, he'd be a great fit with Detroit, especially when you consider that Bertuzzi's probably not coming back after this year. Pius Suter, he's a UFA at the end of the year as well. You did bring in Andrew Kopp. You have Dylan Larkin. But to have those 3 guys as they're both all centers, but Kopp and Kadri can both play the wing. So you can kind of work things around there. They can take faceoffs on their strong side. There's a lot of options that come with that. And I think that he'd fit in really well with what Detroit's doing, having already won and going, I could go somewhere where they haven't won and where they're not great, and maybe we could be in a position to win in 3 years. I don't know.
Yeah, that's definitely a realistic possibility, but I just don't think Detroit obviously is going to be, at this point, I don't really think they're looking to add anybody to the forward group. They already have too many forwards, really. They're going to have to make a couple waiver decisions on a few guys.
We got to think
Giovanni Smith, Adam Ernie, but
I was going to say you got to think that Calgary might be interested in Kadri at this point.
Yes, that is another team, right, that I would pinpoint because they're going to lose a lot of offense with Johnny Gaudreau gone, and they're going to need to replenish it, right? So, again, they have the, obviously what we had, Backlund and Elias Lindholm playing center for this team in a 1-2 punch. But, again, you could move one of these guys to the wing to fill in on Gaudreau's spot. I mean, Elias Lindholm can certainly shift to the wing. You can bring in Kadri and let him be your top line center, at least for another, 3-4 years. But
sure.
I think the biggest concern, and maybe what's holding most of this up, is the fact that he probably wants 7 years, and I don't think at 31 years old anybody wants to give him that right now. And so that might be the ultimate holding point, right?
Yeah, I think you're looking at a 5-year deal for Kadri would be my assumption.
At most.
A 5 years is probably what's going to get the AAV down a little bit to where a good team could sign him now, and then you'll worry about it later. Well, it'll be interesting to see what
5
happens.
times 7. And the nice thing is with the cap going up in 2 seasons, again, when you get into the back end of a 5-year deal, those last 2, maybe that, last year, depending on, how he really ages, it won't look as bad, I guess, if the cap really goes up the way everybody predicts it will. Absolutely.
Let's go to Andre Palat, who signed actually after we talked. So did Johnny Gaudreau. We'll get your thoughts on both those deals, Gaudreau and Palat.
Oh, so Palat, I mean, look, I think he obviously wanted a little bit more money than maybe what Tampa had to offer. And, it was clear that they needed to move some money out in order to keep him after giving, those 3 guys, those big 8-year extensions. And so, Palat, it was pretty easy. It's like, okay, cool. Well, I got to go sign somewhere else. And I think New Jersey is a team that was really looking to score a high profile winger. They want a guy who has, a lot of experience because they are a fairly young team. And look, they didn't get Gaudreau, so obviously the next best thing was Andre Palat. And to me, I think they got a quality player who is, a heart and soul type of guy. He's not necessarily your go out and grind it type of heart and soul player, but he commands a lot of respect in the locker room. He's got, a couple cups to go with it. So
clutch gets. I mean, the most game-winning goals in the playoffs in Tampa Bay Lightning history.
He's Justin Williams. I mean, that's essentially what you're getting.
There you go.
And so you get a guy in a team that is so young that's going to get a great experienced player to play in your top 6, whether that's with Nico Hischier or Jack Hughes, and it's just gonna be dynamite. I think it's going to be a good fit, at least for the next few years. Hopefully, New Jersey can take that next step now, and really, I mean, again, they moved out Pavel Zacha too, so I think Eric Holland's going to fit in quite nice with that team as well. So again, they've got more options on the wing now, and
Pavel Zacha got dealt.
No, that's what I mean. They moved Zacha out for Eric Holla.
Okay,
and so now you have a great option.
I missed everything you said there other than Pavel Zacha, and I was like,
So you have a guy now who you can shift on the wings. He doesn't have to play center like he was trying to fill in on that second line center spot in Boston. But the great thing is he can fill in at center if you need him to, which is fantastic and gives them a little bit more depth and ability to maneuver lines around, to find the right chemistry. But overall, I think Palat's going to be a good fit in New Jersey. And then when you go to Gaudreau, right, I think... Oh,
hold on. Can I just add something with Palat?
Oh, let's go.
Here's my theory with Palat. I know, remember, Tampa Bay was like, we got to move McDonough so we can re-sign Palat. That was like the narrative that had been put out there, at least what I saw, was, in order to re-sign Palat, we're definitely going to have to move McDonough.
Right.
Here's what I don't think they ever had any intention of signing Palat. I think they moved McDonough because they knew they needed to re-sign other players, and they knew that it would be a lot easier to do it this year when there really wasn't the crunch. They really didn't have to deal McDonough, but they did so that those 2 years, like the 2 years remaining after this year, would be easier to move. And I think that he had more value today than he would in a year when people start going, he's getting a little old and maybe he doesn't look quite as good this year. And then it would have been a lot harder to move it next year. I think they moved it to re-sign the 3 guys they did. And I think they said they were doing it for Palat. Like, we really want to re-sign Palat. I don't think they ever had any intention of re-signing Palat. I think they did him a favor and made New Jersey believe that they were going to re-sign him and give him a decent dollar amount, and it made New Jersey pay more for Palat and got him more money.
I like the theory about getting him more money, but I completely agree with you in the fact that I believe Tampa just had again, no intention on re-signing him, knowing the 8-year deals they were going to have to hand out to Chernak, Sergachev and Cicerelli.
The only way they could have re-signed him is had they been willing to or found a partner for Alex Killorn. I think that if they had traded Alex Killorn at the draft, it would have been more feasible to re-sign Palat. I think there was maybe a deal to be made, but because that obviously didn't happen, they went in a different direction. And I think they replace him with Nemesnikov, who can play up there. They know they love Nick Paul, who I'm expecting that they think Nick Paul could maybe play up in the top 6 based on like the contract that they gave him. I think that they're hoping that he will. And then once again at the deadline, they'll just trade their 2025 pick for another player who can come in there, because you don't care. I mean, yeah, the 2023 draft is going to be really good, but at this point, you don't care. You're in win now mode, and you've got nothing to do with that draft. So you're just going to trade your picks and see if you can get back to the finals again and see how much success you've got.
Here's the crazy thing. I mean, when you really look at it, right? So, again, I absolutely agree with you. I think they traded McDonough fully knowing that they weren't going to re-sign Palat. But part of that goes into the fact that, yes, I think they like to hold on to that first-round draft pick in 2025 because they still think they can compete. They're going to try to make some moves at the deadline. But for me, I think it's more or less if they traded him next year after they had these extensions in place, knowing they don't have the cap space to re-sign anybody or put a team. Yes, absolutely. Yep. Someone would have been like, okay, cool, give us the first rounder and we'll take his contract from him. Right? So they basically just offloaded him for future considerations, which is nothing. Because, again, when you look at next year, they have roughly close to $4 million in cap space, and they only have 4 defensemen signed. They have 7 forwards signed. So they don't even have a hockey team to put on the ice. So somehow someone else is going to have to get moved potentially, or they're going to have to, who knows? Maybe it's Steven Stamkos you have to move, or
that's never going to happen.
I mean, yeah, but
honestly, that is now at this point, the Steven Stamkos being dealt is literally never going to happen. Now he may not get re-signed to an $8.5 million. Like he's the franchise player. He has now eclipsed LeCavalier. He's eclipsed Martin St. Louis. Like Tampa Bay has had a bevy of riches in terms of superstar players. And Stamkos is the guy. There's no one better to sell the game in Florida than Steven Stamkos, and he'll have a deal there as long as he wants to keep playing hockey. Now it's not going to be for $8.5 million, but I think his next deal will still be for a good chunk. But they're absolutely, that will never happen in my mind.
Well,
unless he wants to leave. But I think he's the Malkin. Right. He's the Crosby. It's that situation.
Oh, he is for that franchise. Absolutely.
You've got Kucherov, Stamkos, Hedman. Those 3 guys are there as long as they want to stay.
Yeah, absolutely. But the thing is again, next year when they have to put a hockey team on the ice, literally outside of the guys they have now, they're going to have to go out because, yes, you can put Brent Seabrook's contract on IR, and then you can get yourself an additional $7 million. So maybe you have close to $10 million. But you're going to have to go out and sign guys for $1.5 million bucks.
You're going to have to pull Toronto Maple Leafs.
Right. I mean, so that's going to be the
if you go and you look at the Leafs in 2023-24, they have currently 6 forwards signed for that year. One of which is Kyle Clifford, so he's not going to play. And they do have 5 defensemen signed for that year, but I mean they have no forwards, and that's just like they're you look at Michael Bunting's going to be a UFA after this next year. If Michael Bunting goes and does exactly what he did this year, if not even better, and he plays with Matthews and Marner and he goes and puts up 70 points again, it's going to be tough not to pay him $6 million a year, which, I mean, yeah, they'll have $16 million in cap space. They will have some room to maneuver, but not that much when you consider Matthews is going to be a UFA. I mean, Tavares won't get re-signed to an $11 million deal when he's done, but it's going to be there's a few teams a lot of teams actually with some pretty crazy cap crunches coming up, and I think it also is where it's hard to tell like how much is the cap going to go up in in 2 years, in 3 years. That'll make a big difference.
That's the nice part for Toronto, right? Because Nylander and Matthews contracts are over in 2 years. So when the new, when the cap rises significantly, like everybody says, that's when their new extensions will kick in. So hopefully for them,
just enough to pay them to pay them even more. Just as much to make Matthews the highest paid player in the NHL when his deal comes up. Like 100%, that's what's going to happen if he re-signs in Toronto. He's signing for probably $14 million over 8 years. Like he's going to sign a monster deal. It's going to be dumb. For sure. Not dumb because there's nothing you can do. You have to sign him. You have to give him.
Yeah, you can't let him walk.
No.
Right.
I mean, he could walk. He could walk if he wanted to.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a whole nother podcast.
Like everybody else.
we won't get into that because that's. I mean, we're definitely going to get into that over the next 2 years. But yeah, that's just not a conversation that I'm quite ready to have yet.
No. But okay, so speaking of going home, though, let's talk about Gaudreau because, again, it was well known that he wanted to go back to the East Coast. Pretty much screwed Calgary at the 11th hour. Didn't even give him any heads up, hey, you know what? No, I'm not signing. I want to go back home. Just straight up. I don't know if maybe he thought or his agent was coaching him hey, you know what? Don't say anything because if for some reason if you can't find a team that's willing to go out and sign you or give you the money term or whatever. Which again is very far-sighted, or such a farce. But let's keep Calgary in our back pocket, and keep them on the hook.
I'll just tell you this: this is what I tell my friends who are making less, not six figures, even. People that are just making normal, middle class, run-of-the-mill money. Your employer doesn't give a shit about you. And that's the way that I feel too in the NHL. The Calgary Flames don't really give shit about Johnny Gaudreau. They care about what he can do for them, and as soon as he's unable to do that for them, they'd have tossed him to the curb anyways. If he had a bad year this last year, this wouldn't have really been a thing, and who knows what they want to do with him moving forward. And it is completely in his right to do it. I think that if the tables are turned, look at Ryan McDonough. He wanted to stay in Tampa. What do? They go to him and say, thanks so much. You're going to get traded to Nashville. Oh, you don't want to get traded to Nashville? Well, guess what? The Columbus Blue Jackets said they'll take you if you refuse. So you have the choice. What do you want to do? They were ruthless. There's a certain level of being ruthless that these teams do. Right? So if that's what this player needed to do to secure their financial future in where they wanted to go, I don't have any problem with it. Yeah, it's maybe it could have been, of course there's maybe a more honorable way, right? I think with the Tampa Bay Lightning, maybe there was a more honorable way to go about getting rid of Ryan McDonough. Maybe saying, hey, we're gonna move you and giving him more time. I don't know. I don't know how you do it, but it certainly seemed or maybe you just don't have that conversation and you just go, you know what? The honorable thing to do for the Lightning would have been, this guy got us 2 Stanley Cups and 3 Stanley Cup finals. We just keep him and we'll worry about things later. That might have been more honorable too, but they didn't because they did what they needed to do for themselves. So I think Gaudreau did what he did for himself, and I don't have any issue with it. Now, if it was Austin Matthews in the Leafs, I'd have a big issue with it. Right?
Well, of course. Yeah, I mean, regardless, it's a business, right? So they're just going to do what they need to do, what's best for them. But all that being said, right, I mean, I know I mentioned I had sent out a tweet that said, hey, you know what, Columbus could possibly be a last-minute player in this deal because it looked like it was going to be down to Philly or New Jersey. At least that's, what Elliot Friedman and, Darren Dreger, all these guys were saying, these insiders here. And Columbus just came out of nowhere. And I mean, really, when you look at it, he chose Columbus. And I was watching an interview with him on Sportsnet, and he was just talking about how he reached out to former players and
Cam Atkinson
about all
these friends with Zach Werenski.
Right. And the more and more he talked, or these players talked about Columbus, the more and more they were glowing about it, which is surprising because I've been to Columbus and it's nice. It's a nice city, but I mean, it's no New York, right? I mean, when you're in Jersey, you can go to New York, hop on a train or, get an Uber and go to New York City. And I mean, it doesn't even compare, right? So,
which to some people that's a thing that they want. Like if it were me, I'd be the same thing as Johnny Gaudreau. Like get me out of these big cities, let me go be somewhere where and Columbus is definitely more of like a small town feel with a big city kind of vibe, right?
Right,
like,
absolutely.
Lots of suburbs
right, all the personal preference of the player, right? And that's what it comes down to. And maybe like I think you and I talked about, maybe it was just far enough away from his family on the East Coast to be like, okay, they can't drive here for the weekend, but they can still come visit all the time, right?
Yeah.
So
I wonder how much COVID had to, just with like, hey, you live in Calgary, you're not allowed to leave. Like it had to have played a part, no doubt. You go, when is this going to happen again? Because Canada's been crazy with this stuff. I don't want to be stuck again without my family. So I don't think I'm going to stay.
And the winters in Calgary are brutal.
Well, that's true too.
Maybe he's just like, what the F is, I don't want to deal with this anymore. Like I want to, be able to get out of my house in the wintertime,
And I'll say he had that right. It seemed like he had made his mind up a long time ago. And I get that maybe there was an inner turmoil there, where you just like, you can't admit to yourself that that's what you're going to do and you're scared to make the decision. I understand all that. But yes, I could say it would have been nice for Calgary to know, hey, Gaudreau's going to leave. And I wonder what would have done at the trade deadline had he said, I think I want to leave. I'm not going to stay. I'll happily play. I'd love to try and win a cup here in Calgary before I leave, but if you need to trade me, that's okay. And
he would have got them some really nice picks.
Yeah.
Something which would have been a great parting gift, right? Saying, you know what, hey, I've enjoyed my time. Here's a little something for you. But it didn't work out that way. Again, it's a business, whatever.
Well, he will be booed for the next 7 years.
I can't wait to watch that first game. Absolutely.
Fortunately for him, he's only going to go to Calgary once a year. Whereas, with the Leafs and Tavares, they were going to New York twice a year. So that's just, double the amount of times you're going. At least you didn't sign within the division, but
right. Yeah. But here's the big problem though, Columbus, right? Obviously, if you're Columbus, Johnny Hockey approaches us and says, hey, you know what? I want to sign with you guys. You obviously can't say no. Well,
the Flyers did.
Well, yeah, the Flyers did, right? But they've got their own problems. But
I can't believe they said no. Unbelievable. I think that's unbelievable. I think it's probably the stupidest, especially after all the remember the press conference last during the winter when they're the CEO of Comcast is, we're going to spend and we're going to do this and that. How are you not going out and getting Johnny Gaudreau? It's the most Flyers thing ever. If Ed Schneider was alive, Johnny Gaudreau would have signed with him. 100%.
100%.
You will not convince me otherwise. He would have just said, trade Rasmus Ristolainen. Don't sign Anthony DeAngelo. I don't care.
Let's go over that cap however much percentage we possibly can.
Yeah. Trade James Van Riemsdyk, trade away our first round pick, and just make it Florida's 2024. I don't care. He would have found a way to do it. And I think it's crazy because if you look at that Flyers offense, if you swap out Van Riemsdyk for Gaudreau, they may already be a playoff team with Tortorella in at the helm. But without him, they are not. They are not a playoff team, and they're also a team that's right up against the cap. They have zero cap space.
Right, and so here's now the thing, right? So yes, I think Columbus is fortunate enough that they got Kent Johnson because I do think he's eventually going to solidify that number one center spot. Cole Sillinger, right? They've got a good center there, Jack Roslovic, so they don't have to worry about finding themselves a legit number one center right now. I feel like someone will grow into that, but they have this other guy, Patrick Laine, now that they have to worry about because they only have, again, $2.3 million in cap space. And yes, you could, potentially throw, Boone Jenner's contract on IR. I don't know, what's going on with their injury situation there, but they've got to move somebody now to make some cap space. And so maybe a guy like, Nyquist might be a cap casualty who's produced pretty dang good for his contract. But someone's going to have to go. I'm not sure who it's going to be at this point. It could be Bjorkstrand. Teams are, still high on him. He could get moved out, even though I know Columbus likes him, but we'll see what happens because they need to make some room to keep Patrick Laine, or maybe they just say, hey, you know what? We've got Johnny Hockey and Jake Voracek, so we're good. We don't need to move, or we don't need to keep Laine, so we'll trade him and get some nice.
I think they want Laine.
I think they do too. Gaudreau and Laine.
They'd love to have him. I got to imagine that you're trying to trade Nyquist as quick as you can.
Yeah, I think he's obviously they would probably prefer to move Voracek, but I don't think he's going anywhere. Nobody wants to take on that contract. So, I think Nyquist is obviously the more likely candidate to get moved, and he's still he's still producing 50 points, which is fantastic. He could still skate fast, and I don't see him slowing down anytime soon. So, we'll see what happens with that. That should be interesting.
All right, let's. Where do we want to go next? I want to talk Calle Jarnkrok signing with the Leafs, because I think that it was one of the, as we talk of the later signings coming through, that one surprised me. I did not, didn't hear anything about Jarnkrok to the Leafs. Really didn't hear much about Jarnkrok, period. $2.1 million over 4 years. It's kind of a long deal for a 31-year-old or a 30-year-old grinder, but in the immediate, what do you think of this move?
I actually like the deal, to be quite honest, because he's shown in the past, especially during his time in Seattle and with Nashville especially, he has the flexibility because he can skate. He can still move up and down the lineup. Now, again, he doesn't produce offensively like most guys that can move up and down the lineup typically would, but if you have an injury for a couple weeks, he can certainly fill in adequately enough.
Yeah.
But he plays a very, very good two-way game. He can play on the wing and play at center, so he plays all three forward positions, which is fantastic. So really, there's a lot of versatility there. And if you want to put him on your, I imagine he's, paid to be playing on that third line right now. He plays great defensive hockey, can still chip in every once in a while, although he, managed not to really put any goals in during the regular season for Calgary. But, again, if you put him out there for 13, 14 minutes a night, I think you're going to get, your $2 million worth. And I think it'll work out nice for Toronto because I really like this player. I think he's a quality bottom six player who can still skate. And so to me, that's, worth it because he can play everywhere.
I think his minutes deteriorated in Calgary. I just don't think he really found a place. Like, he's just playing less than 14 minutes a game. And I don't think it was his style of play.
No, sometimes you just don't fit, right? I mean, that's just the way it is.
And yeah, I look up and down the Leafs lineup and you think, all right, what's the one thing the Leafs needed to do? Yes, they needed to get a goaltender. They got a couple. We don't have to talk about what we think they'll actually do. We already did that on the last show. You can go back and listen to that. But they have their goalies, right? They're set in terms of their goaltending at this point in time. They still have to re-sign Rasmus Sandin, and that may cause some ripple effect throughout the defensive pairings. We'll see who actually gets moved. It looks like someone will get moved. But what the Leafs really needed to do was create a bottom six that could contribute. Right, that was definitely their biggest problem throughout the regular season and in the playoffs. I mean, Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, they carried this team. You hope that Tavares can come back, and I know that Tavares he was still putting up big points. He's still a point per game guy, 76 points in 79 games. He had some stretches where he wasn't great. He was fine in the playoffs. You're not looking at that top six and saying there's any issues. Like we can, any small problem is, it is what it is. Yes, he's not an $11 million player, but he's still a number two center in this league and a damn good number two center. Could be a number one center on a lot of teams in the NHL. But the bottom six was old, slow, couldn't produce offense. And now suddenly you've got Calle Jarnkrok, you've got Nicholas Abu-Kabel, you bring in Adam Gaudette. Like, there are some decent pieces that have now kind of filtered into what will be a pretty decent bottom six now that you don't have to rely on Wayne Simmons, Kyle Clifford, Jason Spezza, guys who are just they're not really NHLers anymore.
No, and the thing I really like about the Jarnkrok signing is you slap him on that third line with David Kampf, and
Dude,
Engvall.
it's Engvall, Kampf, and Järnkrok.
And it's a shutdown line.
Yes.
It's a really good shutdown line, right? So you can let Tavares, you can let Matthews go out there and go ham offensively, and then when you're playing other guys' top lines, you can throw these three guys out, and I'm not worried about it, right? I think these guys can hold their own, and David Kampf has proven, he can still contribute offensively, and so Järnkrok as well. And you know what? Hey, even if maybe those three guys aren't really gelling that well, you can move Kerfoot down, put Järnkrok up on that second line, and get somebody who's a little bit of sandpaper to John Tavares and Nylander's skill.
Yep. And Järnkrok he's been on penalty kills. He was on Calgary's penalty kill. He can, maybe not to the extent like Ilya Mikheyev, $5 million player that the Leafs were getting for much less. There's nothing you can do about it. You were going to lose him. Nothing you can do. Calle Järnkrok is not Ilya Mikheyev, especially in terms of goal scoring and maybe that shorthanded threat to score a goal. But he's still an effective player. He had 12 goals in 49 games for the Seattle Kraken. He can put the puck into the net. And I think he's a really nice replacement. I think that they get Per Engvall signed for a decent deal there, especially given his prowess on the penalty kill. I think their bottom six is much improved. And I'm wondering here, who's going to get moved on the defensive side? That's really the next big question mark. Is it Justin Hall? Is Jake Muzzin going to ultimately get moved? Or is it Rasmus Sandin that gets moved, which would be a real shame because he's got so much potential and is the youngest person on this blue line. And it would be nice to see, the last 4 years of development that the Leafs have put into him, that it becomes something significant in the future. So I for one, am not on the trade Rasmus Sandin train.
No, me neither. I think if anybody gets moved, if I had my, pick of the litter, I guess, I would probably trade Jake Muzzin if it was me.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I
think he gets you the most value for what you're getting rid of, and you're able to replace him with. So
yep, you can can replace him on the left side. Now, granted, you aren't replacing. Yes, you are going to have someone different there who can play the left side. The issue is you don't replace Jake Muzzin because you don't have anyone else like him. And that's the hard, you signed Jordy Ben, who is a very, very light version of Jake Muzzin. Yes, he's a big guy. Yes, he can throw around his body, but he's not Jake Muzzin. Jake Muzzin, if he's healthy, he's really good. When he's not healthy, that's the issue. He's taking up so much cap space and for a guy who's not healthy. But
No, personally, if I'm Toronto, I go out and I just, again, if you want to move Jake Muzzin, move him now, and just go ahead and, again, this team gets a little bit thinner on the blue line as far as the physicality goes. But hey, you know what? You don't need that in the regular season, right? They can go out at the deadline and acquire that physical presence on the blue line if they need to.
Just go trade Jake Muzzin and get someone to, and then just trade back for him. In the off season, and then just get them to take half the deal. Can you do that? Are you allowed to do that?
I don't know, actually. That's a very good question.
After you trade a player, how long can you wait? Yeah, we'll have to find that out.
Yeah, come on, Cat Friendly.
All right. Anything? Any other deals that you want to hit on here?
I guess the only other one, if I had to just pick one for pick's sake, is just Dylan Strome going to the Capitals for 3.5. I think that's just a quality signing, given that Backstrom's going to be out for most of the year. I think this is a guy who thrived in Chicago playing alongside talented wingers, and I think going to Washington, he's going to have that opportunity with guys like Mantha and TJ Oshie. I think there's going to be plenty of opportunity for him to still produce and then sign another big deal after this season. So I thought it was
he's an RFA, move. So they have him. That's a beautiful thing. Yes, he's arbitration eligible, but I wonder after this year, when you're looking at Nicholas Backstrom, sometimes you wonder, when a 34-year-old misses an entire season and has some pretty intense surgery, there has to be question marks about whether or not he's played his last game in the NHL.
Ryan Kessler's career, right? So
exactly, and so you maybe wonder, maybe Dylan Strome is the answer long term, or at least in the relative short term next couple years here.
It was a number 3 pick, so I mean, the skill level's there.
Yep. Very rarely do you have a guy who bounces around, being highly touted, bounces around, and then all of a sudden becomes a superstar. I don't think he's in the superstar range. I think we've kind of seen what Dylan Strome is, and that's a pretty good second line center. And he can, you're right, he can play with some more talented guys, and he's shown that. I mean, I think in Chicago he maybe had a little bit more free reign because they weren't quite as good. We'll see what he can do on a team that is good, right? Like maybe that's actually what he needs, is being on a team that is playoff bound. Or, I think we look at Washington and we say, well, they're a team that definitely has expectations at least of making the playoffs. Whether they make the playoffs or not, that's another story. But they're definitely trying to make the playoffs. They're not trying to lose. We'll say that. Whereas Chicago and Arizona, they weren't winning anything.
Yep. So that's it for me. But unless you have anybody else you want to talk about,
I guess when I look over the landscape of what has happened here in free agency, I mean, there's just so many. There's been so many deals and so many players, and actually a good amount of trades as well. I'll say that I always look forward to seeing some of these players in new uniforms. It's always fun, just to have a little bit of movement and to think about how guys fit into their new structure. But when I look at the Pittsburgh Penguins, who, yes, they've made some moves on defense. They trade Matheson for Petrie, and they sign Jan Ruta. They trade for Ty Smith and deal John Marino to the New Jersey Devils. They also got Ryan Poehling in that deal with Montreal. I don't feel as though Pittsburgh has made any. They didn't make a drastic change, I'll say, but I really like the moves they made, and I love that they went out of their way to bring everyone back, and they're gonna they're gonna try this again. And I assume, hey, draft picks will be maybe not that first round draft pick, but they'll probably use some picks in their arsenal to bring guys in later in the year. They have a little bit of cap space left now, and only Kasperi Kapanen to sign. He is going to arbitration, so we'll see what he ends up getting in arbitration. But I really like the moves. I also love Ty Smith going to Pittsburgh, who's going to really get an opportunity to show us that rookie season wasn't a fluke.
Right. That's the question mark, right? Because I think he could, potentially be a good offensive defenseman for them down the road, and might not cost them that much either, too, right? So he could be a complementary piece to Chris Letang, maybe on a second pairing, or be a power play specialist.
I think he's going. You would like him to line up with Jeff Petrie. Jeff Petrie be the guy who's more the stay-at-home defenseman, and then Ty Smith has this defensive partner who can kind of make up for some of his mistakes. I think that would be your ideal world. But the Penguins do have a lot of options. I mean, you got to love Jan Ruta. He played so well for Tampa Bay. Kind of this like unsung guy. He's 31, but sort of just coming into his own over the last couple of years, and I really like the move.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like the fact that they had to eat the whole entire salary for Jeff Petrie for all 3 years, but I mean, hey, if you're looking at this as like, hey, you know what, we're going for it. We're Pittsburgh, we don't have but a couple of years left. Really, the window's closing. I like the moves because, again, Ty Smith is a good long-term option for this team if they envision him to turn out the way he was projected in his rookie season. And then, Jeff Petrie, obviously, if I had my choice between Matheson and Petrie, I'm going to take Petrie all day.
If he's still good, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the thing, right? Is he still that? But there was also, I can't remember where I saw it, but there was an article they were talking to Jeff Petrie, and that possibly getting traded, always on the block, really affected him mentally in Montreal. And of course, other things when your team's so bad weighs on you a lot. Yeah. So he had some mental stuff he was battling, and so I think now he goes to a fresh place, fresh building with a championship caliber team. There's a lot to be excited for, right? I get to play with Letang, with Crosby, with Malkin. Maybe he, he finds that old form.
I think a lot of weight has been lifted from players who are leaving Canadian teams and going to an American team. I really, especially guys that are probably like a Johnny Gaudreau and Jeff Petrie. He's American. Like, you think about some of these guys that are American who maybe are like, dude, why are like locked down up here? Like, it's been much more strict throughout the whole process. And I've got to think that that's had to weigh on them. And so now being in the U.S., I wonder if that has a massive impact on the way that they play on the ice. And,
sure. Also from a media standpoint, right? I mean, when you look at, the Canadian markets, the way the media is up there versus a lot of these U.S. cities, it's crazy. Yeah,
that too. I mean, you look at like Edmonton. They weren't. I mean, yes, they signed. Funny enough, I mean, I guess you've got Jack Campbell, who is American, and he's signing, going from Toronto to Edmonton. But in reality, I think that was the team that was going to give him the biggest contract. Like, he chased the money, and that's fine. I would too. I'd probably chase the money.
For a guy like that, right? This is his only contract really he's ever going to get. So.
Right, exactly. So you got to do what you got to do. But you look at it, and I mean, I've heard from several different places that Canadian teams are having a harder time right now luring in free agents, and I think that that's absolutely true. Yes, you're always going to be able to pull in the guys who are, I'll say, your middle class of the league. Like, the middle class players, they just want to get paid. To some respect, they want to get paid because, like you said, it's sometimes their only chance to get paid. So they're going to go where they can maybe get some money, whether that's a Canadian or American team. But some of the big name players, they're going to go where they have a little bit more freedom to live and to travel and to be with their family. And maybe that's not as big of a deal for a European player who it may, they may not have the same desire to go travel during the season anyways. Like, it's not like during the season you're just flying back to Russia or flying back to Sweden for a weekend. Like, that's not really happening. But I think when you're talking North American players, I would imagine that it would make a difference. But
yeah, for sure.
Well, I think that's it on the free agent portion of the UFAs. You want to talk just a little bit about some of the RFAs that are out there right now?
Oh, yeah, let's...
We have not talked about Matthew Tkachuk yet, who is probably the largest elephant in the room. But they've got Tkachuk and Mangiapane, both RFAs. Mangiapane went and did arbitration, or he's going to. Tkachuk did not. So I'm wondering, potential holdout on Tkachuk's part. Like, is he mulling over whether he's even going to stay this year? Like, or are the Flames mulling over whether or not they can win without Gaudreau now?
Well, listen, I think so. There's two guys that didn't elect, big name RFAs that did not elect arbitration. That's Matthew Tkachuk and Pierre-Luc Dubois.
Laine didn't either.
Laine did. Okay, sorry. Yeah, but so what
Apology
I think more
accepted.
or less. Yeah, thank you. I think honestly, in Tkachuk's case, more than PLD's case, and Dubois come out and said he wants to play for the Habs, so that's something to think about, right? So he kind of put it out on the table. But I think for a guy like Tkachuk, with no Gaudreau there, right, he's got to be mulling over his future, and because he doesn't go to arbitration, he can sign a 1-year deal now and then bolt for free agency next year, become a UFA automatically. But the other big piece of that is now teams, I think it's at midnight tonight or maybe 8 o'clock, I can't remember. Other teams can start submitting offer sheets to these guys now automatically, and then potentially, give up any compensation.
Right. If they had done arbitration, it locks those other teams out.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's the big thing. Because no matter what, they become a UFA after this year anyways.
Right. So, you know what? I think Tkachuk's, maybe playing it as in, I'm going to sign a 1-year deal and then weigh my options next year, see where this team goes as far as talent-wise. If we drop significantly, then, I'm out of here. If we kind of hang around and there's a plan in place, then, yeah, maybe I might hang around, sign long-term.
Right. You bring in Nazem Kadri. Maybe that's okay, we're still trying to win here. You do what you can. Maybe you're able to go and, there are some other decent players out there on the free agent market. When you're talking like Phil Kessel's still out there, Nino Niederreiter's still waiting around. I mean, John Klingberg, who I wonder if he actually signs in Detroit, but he's still hanging around. I don't know that Calgary's really in the market for a defenseman, but there are other players, right, that are out there that are good, and so. You wonder, that's a good thought. Is he just sitting around waiting to see if they'll do something else before he's willing to sign? Because maybe he's going, I'll sign an 8-year deal if you guys go out and make a big splash right now.
Yeah, and the other thing is too, right? Again, whether it's through signing one of the remaining free agents, or whether it's maybe making a deal through a trade somehow, a guy like Tkachuk might say, you know what? I want to see how much money is left for me, because if for some reason, they go out and they sign Nazem Kadri, overpay for him, and say give him $8.5-9 million at 7 years, that doesn't leave as much money on the table for a guy like Tkachuk down the road. Or maybe he says, you know what, I want to see who you guys are planning on signing so that I can take less money. So maybe next year we can go out and get like a Ryan O'Reilly or somebody else, right? So, again, there's two sides to the puzzle in this equation here, and so I'm curious to see how this all plays out with Tkachuk, because again he's the prize, right? I think if you look at all the RFAs out there right now, if you're going to make an offer sheet to anybody and lose a bunch of first rounders, is he the guy maybe you go after? I mean, personally, I don't think there's value in giving up 4 first round picks if you're going to pay him over 10 points up to $1 million, but I guess it depends if your team's in win now mode, right? So
yeah, I mean You don't win and lose with one player. Yes, very important player, Johnny Gaudreau, but it's not as if you didn't slot someone else up there that they still wouldn't be really good still. It's not as if their whole team needs to fall apart. That is the one thing about the whole conversation about losing Gaudreau. The Flames are a really good team. They have a fantastic D-core. They can still score goal. Like, Mangiapane played less than 17 minutes a game, and he had 35 goals. Unbelievable. 25th highest scoring player in the league, and he's the only one in the top, 40 or 50 or something like that played less than 17 minutes a game. So, I mean, it's not as if you don't have other players that you have to move up in the lineup. You have them. Yes, they're not Johnny Gaudreau, but you still have players. You could still win. You're still in a weak Pacific Division. So I think you still have to look at this and go, we still have a shot. Especially after this year, Lucic is the UFA. That loops up a lot of money there too. And you can go right back to trying to haul in another big name player via free agency. Just because you lost out on Gaudreau doesn't mean that you're going to lose out on the next guy, and you don't want to lose your superstar player in Matthew Tkachuk. You just tell him, dude, you're our guy. I mean, Gaudreau, we love him, but you're our guy, and we'll go and we'll do what we need to do in the following offseason. We'll toss a bunch of money at David Pastrnak. We'll try to go out and get Ryan O'Reilly. There are going to be some good UFAs out there that they could bring in and replace that contract. Hey, Jonathan Huberdeau's a free agent. I don't know. That's so far down the road. It's hard to make big judgments. But hey, JT Miller is a free agent at the end of the year. How good would he look in a Calgary uniform? He would fit great with the Daryl Sutter scheme. There are players out there. Calgary is going to. It doesn't need to tear this whole thing down. I think that's the most media stupidity kind of conversation where you're just trying to get people to be mad.
Right.
They don't need to tear the whole thing down. I mean, it's let's take another team. Let's go Toronto. Let's say Matthews leaves. Are they going to tear the whole thing down and say, "Oh, yes, we have to completely rebuild now"? No, they would go, we still have Marner, we still have Nylander, we can still, and we still have a lot of money, and we're still Toronto. We'll figure something out. I mean, yes.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I mean, the nice thing for Calgary, right, is so next year you have, at the end of the season, you got Sean Monahan 6.3 coming off the books, so you can still go out and acquire another big piece, right?
Right.
I mean,
Exactly.
And you've got Jacob Markstrom, who to me is a top 5 goalie in this league right now. You've got him signed for a reasonable cap hit for the next few years. So if you're Matthew Tkachuk, you can look at this and say, again, we've got a great system, a great defense. We've got a great goaltender for the next few years. Our window is not shut, even without Johnny Gaudreau, right? We can go in and plug him, because I think Daryl Sutter's system is so good. The way he relies upon guys playing good at both ends of the ice. You don't need to be, just a destroyer of goals, right? You don't need to put up 50 goals, on your top line, each player, to have a successful team, right? So you can bring in a guy who could put up 25, 30 goals. Again, like you talked about, a Nino Niederreiter, right? You could bring in that kind of guy. You could bring in
Kadri would be a good fit there, I think. But
you could go out and get Jesse Puljujärvi, right? And maybe have him get a resurgence, playing in a different system. I don't know if this, to me, I don't know if this system would exactly work, but, again, you go out and you try to find other guys to fill in. And I think, with the system they have, they can do that fairly reasonably without having to really drop as far as, standings and cup contending ability is concerned.
It just depends on if Matthew Tkachuk wants to go and sign with the St. Louis Blues, which that's where he's from. That's, his dad. He's got that huge connection with Keith Tkachuk and St. Louis is about to, Ryan O'Reilly, Tarasenko, they're going to be UFAs at the end of next year. There is definitely got to be some people looking over there going, he could come here. We're going to see if he can come here.
And what about that too? Tarasenko, right? You want a goal scorer who can come in and fill in real quick for Johnny Gaudreau. There's a guy right there who can still skate, can still score. You bring him in for 4 or 5 years, I have no problems giving him $8.5, $9 million.
All right. Wow. $9 million for Tarasenko, eh? Even though no one,
I don't know. I mean,
no one would trade for him. But yeah, I mean, he had 34 goals, 82 points last year. He played fantastic, and he played great in the playoffs.
Yeah, and you put him with a guy like Tkachuk, I think he would thrive.
Yeah,
I really do.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll leave it at that for today. But I mean, things are going to be happening all throughout the summer. I think it's time that we'll start going through some lists. We haven't done a good list in a little while.
Oh, and, how I have missed
our top 10s. That's our thing. So we'll figure out some good lists. If you have as a listener, you're thinking of some cool lists out there, whether it be current or former players or teams, hit us up on Twitter at OT Hockey Talk and toss us your ideas. We've used many listener ideas before for our lists, so we'd love to get your ideas, and Justin and I will come up with some good stuff this summer. We won't keep you hanging for the summer. Like all these other people that just leave. All these other people that need vacations because it's their actual job. This is like our vacation when we get to talk hockey. So you're along for the ride all summer, and we'll just we'll be doing our list. So make sure to come back, hit subscribe, do all that good stuff, and we will talk to you guys next week.